Well, hi, Christy. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Hi, Jenny. It's nice to be here.
Well, thanks. Just so everybody knows, what we thought we would do is while we're, kind of crossing the halfway point of our Childhood Sexual Abuse Survivor Awareness Month and our month-long Race for Healing, we thought we would just touch base with some of our participants and hear how things are going. And you are someone who's been participating and posting, and so we thought you might be a great person to have a conversation with. So thanks for saying yes.
It is my pleasure, and thank you for all that Wings does in my life.
Well, it's our honor and pleasure. So honored to be on this journey with you. And would you like to tell people kind of about who you are, what you've been up to lately in terms of on your journey?
So on my personal journey, which has been going on for quite some time, I ended up writing a book. And the name of the book is Meet Carey Jones. And it's about my own personal healing journey. I never intended to write a book. I never intended to talk about childhood sexual abuse. I was in therapy, and my therapist asked me a completely benign question about my early childhood. So, I had a split-second decision to make. I could either answer the question, or I could lie, because I had never told anybody. And so the funny thing is that neither one of us can remember the actual question. We just know it was a vague question about my early childhood. So I've been writing this book, which was never intended. And that was really after, 12 years of therapy. So, it's been going on for quite some time. And then I saw what Wings was offering this month. And I was already feeling anxiety anyway, which I think maybe the universe is feeling anxiety just with COVID, and it lends itself to isolation. We are not meant to be isolated as a society, and we are isolating. So it really has spread into this pandemic, between our ears, and it just raises our anxiety. And again, I just saw what Wings was offering, and I decided just to embrace my healing, and I just view it as a total gift. It's fall. I talk about in my book how I have a reaction to fall, and I know that. And I think every family has their own family stuff that, there's so much going on just with this COVID, with the rise of childhood sexual abuse and domestic abuse in general. And I just think that there's a lot of anxiety. So that's why I'm here.
Well, I so appreciate that. And there's a lot in that statement. And I want to go back to the question that your therapist asked you. You're not sure exactly what it was, but I can tell what your answer was, or what your instinct was in that moment, which was to step toward your truth. So anything you want to share about that? Like what prompted you to do that? And again, thinking about other survivors that might be in that spot or find themselves at some point in that spot. Like for you, what was that like?
So for me, I think it was probably a unique situation in that I already had this relationship with my therapist that I trusted him completely. And I think you have to have that trust, and he knew where to go with that information, but it really was a benign question. And if somebody finds themselves, like, if they're thinking about sharing or not thinking about sharing, if they come to that, it's such a personal decision. I would always encourage sharing, because healing is heavy. I mean, it just is heavy, but it's heavier alone. And in my case, I'm going to have to say, I don't even think I definitely was not evolved enough to know that I had all this underlying deep, dark secret. But, it took a lot of digging, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And it wasn't a linear voyage for me. It still isn't. There's nothing linear about it. And sometimes it's way uphill, and sometimes I'm doing better. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I just think that's amazing that you did. It was the right time for you when I'm hearing you were with someone that was safe, and that began a deeper part of your healing journey. And I know there were many steps to that journey. And then the most recent being writing and publishing your book. And you also mentioned the fall. And because I have read your book, I guess I just want to touch on a couple things you said, and then we'll move back into the race. But I hadn't thought about that until you mentioned it, that the fact that our race for healing is in the fall, and that is such a meaningful thing for you because of your journey. Do you want to share a little bit more about that? Is that giving anything away in terms of your book?
Oh, I don't care if it gives it away or not, but meaningful. You use the word that fall is a meaningful time for me. I don't think that I'm there yet. I don't think that I would use the word meaningful. It's a time of like, I really have to fight through this. It's a time of paralysis, and I always knew that I never really liked the fall, but I didn't ever know why, or I just knew that things were dying, and I didn't like this season. And anywhere, fall is a beautiful season, but oh my goodness, in Colorado, it's just on fire and just so fabulous. And frankly, I just couldn't wait for the season to be over. And you know, the first snowfall, well, this one was a little early in September, but you know, in November or December, I am always so relieved. So that took some digging too, to figure out why. And we determined that my childhood sexual abuse occurred in the season of autumn. And so I start panicking when I see the first turn of yellow. And I live up in the mountains, so it's earlier than in Denver. But now I at least have some tools to work with, and I have the awareness, or I can have the awareness.
And I totally get that in talking with you. And I just honor like what a journey that has been for you to like do that discovery work and do that healing work, and to be at a place now where, again, you've written about it, and you're, you know, just to notice what that brings up for you, and to have, like you said, have the tools to navigate that now. Which again, there's so much more we could talk about. Maybe we'll need like a follow-up to really dive into your full journey at some point. But what I appreciate is just within the context of who you are as a survivor and the work you've done, and that you've published this book, and it came out in March?
May.
So during COVID, and I'm sure that's interesting just to have that, your story out in the world. And then coming into September and the race for healing, I guess what I've noticed is that you're posting about that on your social media handles, and it's been inspiring for me to watch that. And so can you just talk more about how that's been for you? And you said like you still have to push through this, and talk more about that.
So I'm really glad that you're finding the posts inspiring. That's really wonderful to hear. It is not easy. I mean, it's a struggle. And it's funny because people that I know have told me that in the past they've noticed that I've made, now that they've read the book, they're like, but you post more pictures of autumn. I thought you loved autumn. And that's always been, that part has always been intentional about telling myself this really is beautiful. And I know that intellectually, but I can't always get it to line up. And so posting about the race for healing, I mean, that's been such a gift to me, like I said, but posting through the season of fall about my book and having the book published, and I haven't had an actual launch yet. And I've been using COVID as an excuse, which was a very valid excuse, but now I need to actually, Wings and the Race for Healing has pushed me like, what are your intentions and why, and all that kind of stuff. And I was forced to write them down and see like things that were in the back of my head that maybe I could do something about. So it's just been a gift to me.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's, I think, what we also want to give more voice to for others, whether you might be somebody who knows you're a survivor, or maybe you wonder, or maybe this is something back there that you're not sure if you want to look at or not, which, as you said, is always a choice. Or if you're a loved one of a survivor, or just someone that's like noticing the post about the race for healing and childhood sexual abuse, and like, I don't know if I want to look at this. Like I'm saying any of those places from which someone could be experiencing this, like resistance is a thing. Uh, and as a survivor, like what I'm hearing you say is, yes, that's true for you. And you're also finding it, like you were saying, it's a gift to be able to move through that. So can you just help people understand that a little bit better?
So, like I said, healing is just a struggle. It is just, it's not, nothing about it is linear. It's a climb. But what I found for me is that I had to decide I wanted to heal, and I have to lean into it, and it is very uncomfortable. But that's okay with me. So there's all kinds of things that will set up triggers and setbacks and things like that, especially during the autumn season for me. But what I have decided is that life is full of triggers and setbacks. I mean, unless you live in some inauthentic bubble or want to go through life that way, you're going to have triggers and setbacks. It doesn't matter who you are. And it doesn't matter if it's about childhood sexual abuse. What I want to learn is how do I mitigate those triggers? How do I get through the setbacks? How do I lean into that and go, okay, so I'm going to be aware, and you turn on that awareness button and take it from there, and get the tools and learn what works for you, and know when you're being resistant. And it might take a while. It still takes everybody a while, I feel like, and it can catch me off guard, totally off guard.
Well, I just so appreciate that. And it's really inspiring again to observe you doing everything that you're talking about, because I know it's not easy, and it's just very cool. And so can you speak to any of the things that you've gained through the activities you've done so far, in case folks haven't tuned in yet and maybe don't know what that's been like? And
okay, so every webinar that I've attended, and so what I did was see a list of what Wings was offering, okay, for the Race for Healing. And I just registered for them, and I put them in my calendar, and I set my alarm as if I was going to a meeting. And I don't give myself the choice, like, you can choose to show up or not show up. This is something that I really wanted to do. And I knew from experience that this was going to be worth its while. But every webinar I've attended, I think, oh my goodness, that was the best one. And then the next one happens, and I think, oh my goodness, no, that was the best one. I mean, they've just all been so over the top. And I think recently what we had it's about healing. I just cried through the whole thing. It was like having however many, but it was refreshing, and it was liberating. It was like all those years of therapy kind of summarized into 2 hours. So maybe it was heavy, but it was okay, and it was welcomed. And but even the movement ones with the yoga, the embodiment, I mean, they've just all been so different, and I've thought everyone was the best.
well, I appreciate hearing that, and I thank you for that. And our intention was to try to pick, aspects of holistic healing that might be helpful to those who are actively healing from childhood sexual abuse trauma or other traumatic events, and that might be useful to everyone during COVID, because as you said, it's so stressful for everyone, in addition to everything else that's happening in the world right now. I guess I wonder, can you speak to, in addition to like the content that was covered, which again, I appreciate hearing was useful, how has that then helped you? How have you been able to take that like to your daily practice? Has it had any transitional benefit to you navigating fall and navigating all of this?
Let's see. Let me think about it. What I remember, what I know about myself is I know enough about my own history and my own self-care, and what deep, dark paths I can easily get on. And so it's just a reminder that to stay in the present, that was then and this is now. And so, even if you just, there's always just to remember that there's always a golden nugget. There's always been a golden nugget in every single one of the webinars that I've attended. But, I don't know that any of it was brand new information to me, but there was always something brand new. Always, it was a good reminder. Like, I know about how important rest is, and I know about sleep and sleep hygiene and nutrition and healthy eating and movement. I know all that stuff, but it's so good to have just a little reminder, like, oh yeah, I'm not quite doing that. So that's how I have experienced it, or just always a good refresher. And
I,
new.
I relate to that. Well, and then I wonder if you could speak to, because something you said too was you know enough to know that you need to schedule this and that there will be something beneficial. I'm wondering, because I've heard you talk about this before, would you feel comfortable just switching gears for a second and talking about anything else wings related that you've done that's been that way, if you feel comfortable?
What else have I done? I have to think about. I um,
I guess like specifically, but we can edit this out if you don't want us to talk about this. Joining a support group,
oh,
because what you were talking about made me think about your therapist
yeah,
mentioning that reaction.
yeah, yeah, of course. So when I was in therapy, my therapist, who actually ended up co-writing Meet Carey Jones with me, and at some point during therapy, he said, Christie, I think it's about time you join a support group. And he didn't mean instead of therapy, he meant in addition to. And I just would have nothing about it. And what I said to him was, I was a little irritated and said that it was a waste of my time, that I didn't want to talk about groups, that I didn't do groups, that it was not for me, and the subject was dead. And so he said, okay. So I was driving home and I just thought, why did he suggest groups? Because I knew by that time for sure, there was no question in my mind that he only wanted the best for me. That's how I found Wings. And I joined a support group. And really shortly thereafter, I applied for the Speak Out workshop and participated in that. And when I finished Speak Out, I was talking to my therapist, and I remember saying to him, I don't think I'm finished. I don't think I'm finished. And he said, what did you have in mind? And that was the first discussion we had that I might write or might write for somebody. And his reaction was interesting. I'll never forget that he sat back in his chair, and I was anticipating something negative, like I've never heard such nonsense or something like that. And he told me that was a brilliant idea. So Jenny, I started writing, and it was really for me. It was all about me. I just needed to heal, and it was about me. And so somewhere along that line, there was a shift that took place, because I just wanted to help somebody. Or I figured if I was feeling this way, there had to be one other person that might be feeling this way. And that became one of my goals, was to help just one other person. And I know that I've done that, because there are a lot of people that are suffering from childhood sexual abuse.
Absolutely. Well, and I remember your speak out, and I remember a lot of how you structured that talk. And I am not surprised at all that you wrote a book, and you do have such brilliance to bring to this. And again, having read your book, I told you I was moved in different sections, tremendously. So I'm glad you said yes to that as well. So I'm seeing a pattern of invitations that feel big, and then a pattern of saying yes when it feels right. And I just want to say again, so inspiring, and so glad that you've done that. So grateful that you've done that. Speaking of gratitude.
I do have that pattern where somebody might suggest something, and I don't regularly this happens to me, where I don't respond immediately. I just have to sit back on it. And sometimes I really wish that was different, but it's not. And so go with that.
Well, I think anyone on the healing journey, that's, as you've said, it is a struggle, and it is not easy. What would you say in terms of the benefits and why someone would want to be up for that? Does it get better, and is it worth it?
Does it get better? Yes. Is it worth it? Absolutely. what would I say to somebody who was trying to decide? I would tell them they're not alone. And I would tell them that healing is an ongoing quest. I mean, it is just, I don't know that it ever really, that you can ever say, I am healed, past tense. I don't know that that happens. I think it's an ongoing journey. And reminders to bring yourself back to the present, and reminders not to fall into the old paths that, of behavior, or to the thoughts, the unworthiness thoughts, unlovable, whatever they might be for a different person. And, but what's key is, I would tell somebody what's key is the awareness. Because if you're aware, you can bring yourself to a different thought process if you're willing to do that. But I would also tell a person, let's see, that it builds resilience. Like, you don't know how strong you are until you start this process, or that you can get through this, or that you are worthy, or, oh gosh, Jenny, there's so much.
That's actually perfect. Were you going to say more?
Well, and I was thinking more, my mind was going to maybe people who are supportive of, that haven't experienced childhood sexual abuse, but they're supportive of somebody who has. And I would, like, I'm thinking specifically of my husband, who recently told me that he braces himself during the fall. And I said, no, we don't brace ourselves. I'm trying to get through it. I don't want to just know that it's fall and now we have to wait until, winter. No, I want to figure this out. And so, we as survivors really need those who love us to be there for us and to take an active part, and to, sometimes he just calls me out on stuff, and I love that. That's how our relationship is. And sometimes he brings my attention back to where, if I'm not aware. So that's helpful to me.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up. And I want to touch on a couple things that you talked about, again, brilliantly. Yes, loved ones play such a role in this process. And we do want to thank everyone who is a support person, an ally, someone who's, courageous enough to be aware of this issue. Because as you said, it's a huge issue. It affects so many people. And it's been too easy for people to just deny that and just not think about it. And so it does take something to be someone who's willing to engage in this issue and this reality, and then to be supportive if they do know someone who's going through this. So I just really echo what you said, and so glad your husband is that for you. And in terms of Wings, just as a plug, we do have a group for loved ones of survivors, and some resourcing for folks in that way. So wanted to highlight that. And then right before that point, when you were talking about resilience, I just wanted to say, it's exactly why we did structure the Race for Healing as we have this year, because we thought, what do people have? Actually, they have some time. Maybe there's still so much happening in the world. People have a lot on their plates. And yet there is this sense of, well, we can't do a lot of things we used to do. So what can we do? And if we can engage in resilience building activities that foster holistic healing, hopefully that is good for us. Because what you touched on, and what I've experienced to be true as well, is if we do those activities over time, there is a cumulative effect, and it does help us over time heal and feel better and do better and have more awareness about what that means for us, which might be a little different for everyone, but generally incorporating the things that work for you really help with resilience building. And, there was a time in my life where I didn't even think about the word resilience, but it is the thing, and goes right along with healing. And I feel like, for our issue specifically, but for the wider world, we need resilience, and we need healing, and we need to understand how to engage in those practices. So anyway, I'm just glad to hear, obviously, that's the path you're on as well. And again, that the timing has been helpful for you in terms of the season that you're in.
The timing is so helpful. And I'm thinking that probably the reason that Wings made this shift was because of COVID. I'm guessing. And so for that, I'm so sorry, but it's the way that it's been set up has just been so helpful. I hope the world is participating. It's just helpful.
Well, that is the intention of our time together today, is just to unpack if people are feeling resistance, we want to say that's normal and it's totally okay. And it's also a choice in how you deal with that. If it is like, you know what, it's just not something, there is too much else going on in the world and I just can't take one more thing, that, you know, I would say trust yourself in that. But if it's like, yeah, I have some resistance, and if someone doesn't know that that's normal and part of the process, we just wanted them to know, like, no, you're right where you need to be.
Brings you right back to awareness, just being aware of that's normal and of being aware of the resistance. Like, oh, and then being aware of what to do about it, which is self-care.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, before we wrap up, did you tell us the name of your book?
My book is Meet Carey Jones, and it's Healing and Support for Survivors of Childhood Sexual Abuse and Practical Help for Parents and Educators. There it is.
So beautiful.
And, you know, I mean, I still find resistance about plugging or talking about my book. And so I don't know that I've ever done that before. So thank you for allowing me to do that. But it was a hard, long journey. And thank you for your support during that. And, you know, you wrote an endorsement for it, which I so appreciate from the bottom of my heart. But so being able to talk about it and being able to talk about it openly here with you and have this Zoom call about Race for Healing is just a huge thing for me. So thank you for that opportunity.
Oh, well, I want to say it's an honor to have had the chance to read the book. And I also wanted to say, I believe where we have resistance is a sign that there is deep growth and like transcendence to have there. So I guess like it always catches me when you share so vulnerably about how that comes up for you. And for me, I'm like, oh gosh, that just means you're just going to keep just growing and thriving in your life because you already are. I mean, I can see it in you and how alive you are with all this that you've already done. And so again, it's really inspiring for me, and I'm sure for others to see you do that. And again, such gratitude that you'd be willing to participate and try it and then talk about how it's been for you. And it's okay if it hasn't been great too. I want to say that. But I hope it has been, yeah, just useful.
How great it's been for me. But back to what you just said about the resistance, like that is one thing I learned in therapy. Like if there is resistance, I sometimes I didn't even know I was being resistant. My therapist always did. And sometimes he would point it out, and I'm sure sometimes he didn't. But it's a good bet if there's resistance going on that there's something deeper there to uncover. And it's work. It is definitely work, but it's worth doing.
That's awesome. Do you want to share who Carey Jones is, or would you encourage people to read the book?
Both. The reason I actually was telling somebody about this today, but Carey Jones was my childhood imaginary friend, and I don't remember creating her. I sort of remember that she was always there, and she knew what was happening to me, and I never had to tell her anything. And so I always thought of her as just this heartfelt good friend, and I still have that feeling for her. And I received a Christmas present every year from Carey Jones because, you know, my family just knew about this imaginary friend. They didn't know the importance of the relationship or anything like that. What I learned in therapy, though, was that by having Meet Carey Jones, she really was a defense mechanism because I didn't have to talk to anybody else about it. I didn't have to go to my parents or my family, or I was just a little tiny girl, but I didn't have to seek out any other help because she just knew. So at one point, I almost changed the title of the book. I was so angry with her. Now, this is an imaginary friend, and I was angry with her. So, be that as it may.
Share why?
Because I think that although she was there for me, she was my defense mechanism. I didn't have to tell my mom, who at the time I didn't know that she would protect me and nurture me and make sure this never happened to me again. I didn't know that, but I know that now. And Carey Jones prevented me or kept me or helped me keep that secret. And, you know, the secret, oh my word, that's a whole nother subject about shame and what that, all that brings up and dredges up. And by talking about it, a natural release of the shame happens somewhere along the line. That happened to me during the Speak Out event. That's the first time that really happened, when I was speaking openly about what had happened to me and what, you know, all the different symptoms that I had that I had shoved underneath the rug. And that's what happens, though, is when we are traumatized, it's just a natural defense mechanism. Our brains intuitively want to protect us. And so they take this little deep, dark secret and they, you know, it's shoved in our brains into a hidden spot that we only take out sometimes if we're forced to, because there are triggers and we don't know what's happening, or very rarely do I know of that was it on the forefront where people wanted to talk about this. It was sort of forced out. In my case, it was therapy.
Well, and also what I want to say is it's a really sophisticated defense mechanism or protective mechanism or resilience practice from the initial trauma. I mean, one that I hear you and I totally understand a point in anyone's journey. And I can think back to my own of a reaction like that, of like feeling bad that we, you know, didn't do something different, you know, and that years went by and we couldn't, you know, have had help sooner perhaps. And I just want to say to you and to anyone else who might be listening that, like, again, that's part of trusting ourselves, that she was there for you until you could be there for you, you know, and now like you're helping other people understand that process. So I don't know if that's true for you or not, but that's what comes up for me.
So you just said something that made me want to ask more, and I don't remember what that was, quite frankly.
Well, I appreciate Carey Jones, and I
appreciate Carey Jones too. You know what, I still think of her as a dear friend. It was really hard for me to kind of go there and realize that she was a defense mechanism. I felt very protective of her, and I still do. And she was always very protective of me. And I also talk about this in the book. The best way I can describe Carey Jones is that in my belief system today, I feel like it was probably a young child knowing God's presence or my guardian angel or something like that. I never had this physical image of her, and I never remember creating her. I just know that she was there. So I do have a great love and fondness for Carey Jones. But I was angry when I learned that she was my defense mechanism.
It makes sense. And that's okay. Just to name too, for anybody listening that maybe doesn't know, it's okay to be angry, and there are things to be angry about with sexual abuse, right?
Without a doubt. I mean, I grew up thinking that anger was bad. And so I shoved any, I didn't have that emotion. And I have a lot of friends that talk to me today that they don't know that just wasn't an emotion that they associate with me. That might be the wrong way to treat anger. There's a lot of ways to treat anger, but to not express it at all is probably not the most healthy thing. And I had to learn that in therapy.
Of course. Well, do you feel like that's part of what you're channeling now in your work? And because I know your book also talks about prevention, and I know those are topics that you're putting out there as well. And so, I mean, sometimes I think we channel those things in impactful ways.
I don't know I don't know the answer to that. I get on this cycle sometimes where I think about prevention, because that really is so key. I mean, just think about that. If all of these sexual abuse acts had been prevented, well, then we wouldn't be dealing with them today. So it is so key. So, you know, it's just this cycle. And if we can prevent one act of childhood sexual abuse by putting this information out there and learning from the unfortunate acts of, you know, that have been committed on others, or maybe some wisdom there, then experience, just experience. That would be really key. That would be really key.
Absolutely. Well, I agree. And until that day, still
Right?
also being there for those who've experienced it. So one of the things, one of our themes for this month is, an invitation to stand with childhood sexual abuse survivors. We sometimes say CSA just to shorten that, but it's referencing childhood sexual abuse survivors. So why do you choose to do that?
Oh my goodness. So Wings teaches that as survivors, we are seen and heard and honored and supported. And I believe that. I mean, I feel that and I've seen that. And so I want to be there for other people. And I also know that I'm not alone. And I want to share that with other survivors. And, and I want to help in the act of prevention. And I want to help in the act of normalizing this discussion. And because it's a taboo discussion to have. But been thinking about this a lot recently. Like maybe it's out in the world. I don't know. Maybe it's with my own little grandchildren. That's okay with me, because it's so important. That it is just so important for everybody to hear this message and to know this message, to feel this message, to know that they're not alone and that this is a subject that needs to be talked about.
I love it. Well, and so if folks want to get your book, where would they do that?
You can get my book. There's a lot of local bookstores that are carrying it, or you can go on Barnes & Noble or Amazon or Archway Publishing. And it's, again, meet Carey Jones.
So great, Christie. Well, I just thank you again so much for all you're doing. And again, the ways that you're inspiring me and so many others. So thank you.
Jenny, it's funny to hear you say that though, because I mean, since the time I met you, which was at Speak Out, I believe, I hope that you can feel or know how many people you really are touching through what you're doing and through your beliefs and through your reaching out, and just know that you really are. And I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. That means the world to me.
Yeah.
And we aren't alone. But that's what I get in return, is that we're not alone. So it's a mutual gift, and I have gratitude. So to go back to the themes that I've heard you talk about this month too. And again, it's a really good reminder for me on a personal level, professional aside, as much as I care about what we do, through Wings, of course, we each have to do that from this personal place. Right. And so I just really appreciate.
Jenny, you talked about gratitude. I'd forgotten about that. Was one of the first webinars of this that was brought up in the Wings Race for Healing this month. And if we did just come from a place of gratitude, that was I know that, but that was a perfect example of a good reminder. I just needed that at that moment, at that time. It was just really wonderful. And until I went to the next webinar, and I thought that one was more wonderful until,
Well, I appreciate that. I do. And our team's been working really hard. And so some of the things you're mentioning, I'm just, again, shout out to our team, and then others on our committee and community that have been doing different sessions. So yeah, we're trying to make it available. And again, just the logistic piece, if someone is signed up for the race and hasn't done those activities, they're all being recorded. And then if someone hasn't signed up, it's not too late to sign up for the race. It's $20 without a t-shirt, $30 with a t-shirt. We have scholarships for survivors and loved ones, so you can do that also for free. And once you sign up, then you have access to all of those things. And we're tracking minutes and also miles, but mostly minutes. Miles are bonus. Because we just want to give this issue our time, personally, collectively. We feel like that's a way to build resilience individually and collectively. So that's what it's all about, and standing with CSA survivors. So again,
I would say do it. It's just, oh my goodness, I can't say enough about it. It's just a gift. That's the one word that keeps coming to me.
Well, thank you. And this, again, maybe the season you're in, I've always said to, if other survivors are like, yeah, I'm not sure that would have the same reaction. That may not be true. We all come to this from where we are. And I guess I just want to say, trust wherever you are in that. And, I have another friend who says well, you had to go there to get here. And so we all have to be in the season we're in. Right. but I do think over time it does get better. I agree with you about that.
Well, that's right. And to be patient with yourself. Like if you're not in that, I would never do that. I have learned through this process never to say the word never. But to be open and to be in tune with what's going on with yourself. And sometimes it's not the right season to reach out and to make your, to disclose to the public, or to even to a friend or to your therapist. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, that you have to be in tune with what's right for you. But you have to reach out if you want help, because there's so much help out there just for the asking, but people don't know to ask to help if they aren't asked or told or informed. So.
Right. And that makes me think I should just say too, so our intake line for folks to make that first call is 1-888-505-HEAL. I hope I can say that right. It's my Kentucky coming out, 4325. And that is a private conversation. So even if that's the first step where it's not public, it's just one person that can provide some direction and some support, that's a great place to start. So
I remember that intake phone call, and it is a great place to start.
I so appreciate you sharing so openly and transparently and courageously. So anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I think I've said everything. I mean, I could just go on, and it would be a repeat of do the race for healing. There's nothing to lose. There's only stuff to gain, and the only place to go is up. And so that would be it sounds like a plug, and I don't mean it as a plug. It's just the truth.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that that's been your experience. And again, others may have different experiences, and we're totally okay with that. Just want to name what we've been observing and seeing with you. And again, appreciate you sharing that. So thank everybody, and we'll wrap up for now.
Thank you, Jenny.